Welcome back, boxing fans, to another great show with Sean on boxing. So, surprise, surprise, this is something that happens consistently on YouTube. Whenever Ring Magazine puts out a pound for pound list, the usual suspects start to moan, groan, and complain that there's not enough representation. And really, that's what this comes down to. This is all about representation. So it really shows you what motivates these kind of channels and these kind of fans. Because if it was about boxing, there wouldn't be such a kickback. There wouldn't be so much moaning and groaning, right? You don't hear Japanese boxing fans consistently moan and groan that the fact that Ken Shiro is never put on Ring Magazine's pound for pound list. And this is a fighter who's obviously a two-weight world champion, was the three-belt unified champion at 108 pounds, now is fighting this week to become a unified champion at his new weight division, which obviously is 112 pounds. So this is a guy that's doing exactly what boxing fans would hope that somebody would do, which is actually fight the other champions. Now, let's go through this list and just take a look because obviously every pound for pound list has issues. Literally, fucking every pound for pound list. I mean, you cannot go through any of these guys' pound for pound lists and look at it rationally because there's biased as hell. Champ side, his pound for pound lists are always fucking ridiculous. All it is based on representation, except by being based on representation, it's not representing other people. But let's get down this. So Usyk is number one. You know, with some people, that's going to be upsetting because there's a lot of people on YouTube that consistently want Bud Crawford to be put into that position. So the fact that Usyk is there, obviously, that's going to rub many people the wrong way. Anui at number two just adds to that because now not only is Crawford not number one, he's not even number two. On Ring Magazine, he's number three. Bivol is now number four. And in truth, some people talked about Bivol potentially moving to number two. And you could justify that because think about what Bivol has done recently. He beat an undisputed 168-pound fighter in Canelo Alvarez. He beat a unified cruiserweight world champion in Zurdo Ramirez. And he beat an undisputed light heavyweight champion in Better BF. Nobody else on this list has done any of that in most recent sort of fights that they've been involved in. So Crawford at three, Bivol at four, Better Biev obviously at five. Better Biev literally just beat Bivol in a very close, very competitive fight. Obviously just lost a very close, very competitive fight. It's hard to really punish one of those fighters based on those high quality fights. These guys are literally fighting pound for pound fighters. Uh, Usyk obviously is fighting heavyweights, not pound for pound fighters, but obviously he's fighting huge heavyweights who he's giving up 50, 60 pounds to. Anui is not fighting pound for pound fighters. Crawford is not fighting pound for pound fighters. Obviously Spence, but outside of Spence, no. Uh, Jesse Bam Rodriguez not fighting pound for pound fighters. Canelo Alvarez historically, but not recently. I mean, outside of Bivol, who was the last pound for pound fighter that Canelo Alvarez fought, and he lost to him. Uh, Junto Nakatani not fighting any pound for pound fighters. Potentially in the future, Bam Rodriguez and Anui. It's good that you have three potential fighters on this list who could potentially match up. Then, of course, Haney fought Lomachenko. But the irony here is the people who fanboy for Haney literally spent fucking years trying to shit on Lomachenko. So how much credit can you really give Devin Haney for beating Lomachenko? I mean, he was a pound for pound fighter, so you give him credit. David Benavidez is the only fighter. Okay, sorry, Beterbiev as well, but literally Beterbiev was just an undisputed champion. David Benavidez hasn't been a world champion in what, 4 years? He's not been a world champion for 4 years, right? So him being on the list is ridiculous. The fact that Shakur is not on this list obviously is an issue. Shakur is obviously a three-weight world champion, was unified at 130 pounds, and currently is one of the best fighters at one of the best divisions in boxing at 135. You could have Lomachenko, Shakur, Tank Davis, all on the pound for pound list. And then, of course, you don't have Tank Davis on the list. Tank Davis, of course, is on my list, but a lot of people feel his past performance, his lack of unification fights, his lack of chasing after the best fighters in and around his division is a negative. And it's true, it is. But I praise him because of the dominance he's shown against the level of competition he's been in. I keep consistent. The same way I praise Golovkin for his dominance against the level of competition he was fighting, right? I give Tank Davis the same praise, right? But the problem is, just like I wanted Golovkin to fight the top elite fighters who were basically ducking him, Cotto, Sergio Martinez, Canelo Alvarez, right? All ducking him. I want Tank Davis to do the same thing, right? And if all those fighters like Lomachenko, Shakur, Teo, Haney, whoever else, Keyshawn Davis, duck him, then we'll be having a different conversation. And then, Ken Shiro also deserves to be on that list. So literally, that's three fighters who all deserve to be on the list above David Benavidez. And I didn't even talk about Zurdo Ramirez, who currently is a two-weight world champion, right? Currently unified champion at cruiserweight, right? Coming off of very good wins in his last three fights, unifying titles, fighting top fighters in the division. Obviously, his only loss coming to Dimitri Bivol, a pound for pound quality fighter. So he definitely deserves to be on the list above David Benavidez as well. So that's four fighters you could put on this top 10 list. Of course, you can't fit all four of them on the list. And that's always the problem with these pound for pound lists. Because I always say there's about 15 fighters in the world who really deserve to be on the pound for pound top 10 list. But unfortunately, you can't really put 15 fighters in 10 positions. So that means some fighters are going to be on the outside looking in, depending on, unfortunately, what they may not be doing. Obviously, Shakur's had some piss poor performances, obviously was injured, and hasn't been fighting the type of competition to really elevate him. Tank Davis, similarly, right? And just had a very bad performance, which he was gifted a draw, right? So you can see him also not being on the list. I think both of them should be on the list. Ken Shiro has been having dominant performances, and he's not on the list as well. Zurdo's been having dominant performances. And once again, he's not on the list as well. So, people that want to push this kind of BS and malarkey, we know why they do it. It's not because they love boxing and they're trying to be fair and they think that somehow Ring Magazine is being unjustified. You heard Fannin, of course, who talked about how there's only one PBC fighter. Well, in truth, it should be Tank Davis because there's only one PBC fighter who even deserves to be mentioned in pound for pound right now, and that's Tank Davis. There's no other PBC fighter currently that is that dominant of a fighter where he deserves to be on this list. But let's go through these guys and talk about why, some of these guys get disrespected because they're not Black American, right? And unfortunately, that's the situation. Some people wish this list had, Bud Crawford, Tank Davis, Devin Haney, Shakur Stevens, and I don't know who else you could put on the list, but let's think of another Black American we potentially could put on the list. So there'd be at least 5 Black Americans on this list because that would make it more fair. People literally put Boots Ennis on the list. Boots Ennis does not deserve to be even in the top 15 of a pound for pound list at this point of his career. But they'll put Boots Ennis on that list. Some people are talking about Abdullah Mason on this list. They're just trying whatever they can possibly to find somebody that represents them to put on this list. It's not based on quality of opposition. It's not based on accomplishments, right? It's not based on what have you done for me lately. 3 key criteria to a pound for pound list. We look at Usyk. Usyk obviously is 23-0, 14 knockouts, and he's a undisputed cruiserweight champion and currently the undisputed. Oh well, sorry. Dubois has one of the titles, but we know Usyk is the undisputed heavyweight champion as well. Inui, two-weight undisputed, four-weight world champion. Crawford, two-weight undisputed, four-weight world champion. Dimitri Bivol, one-weight world champion, currently undisputed, beating Zurdo Ramirez, beating Canelo Alvarez, beating Beterbiev, all potentially pound-for-pound fighters. Three pound-for-pound fighters, really. Beterbiev, right? When you look at his resume, it was better than Bivol's, especially with the victory over Bivol, right? Vosdick, Bivol, Smith, fucking Anthony Yard, Smith. He's had a really great run. And his performance against Bivol were fucking fantastic. Jesse Bam Rodriguez, obviously a 2-weight world champion, was unified at 112 pounds. Now it is 115. His next fight, from what we hear, is going to be unification. So he's going to be a 2-weight world champion, unified in both of those divisions. That's something the majority of fighters in boxing aren't doing. He's doing it. What we'd love to see him do is go up to his third division and take on Junto Nakatani. That would be a fucking legacy fight. Canelo Alvarez, come on, let's be honest. Canelo Alvarez is a 4-weight world champion, undisputed 168-pound fighter, right? Him and Bud Crawford may not be the fight a lot of people wanted. People may have preferred the David Benavidez fight. That's fine. I have no problem with the fight at all. But to be fair, there's nothing about a David Benavidez Canelo Alvarez fight that's going to sell as much and be as big, especially to non-boxing fans, as a Bud Crawford Canelo fight. That fight is going to be the biggest fight of 2025. So, and Crawford beats him, he becomes a 3-weight undisputed champion. Something that probably nobody will ever do in history, right? Probably. You never know, but, it would be unlikely. Junto, who gets a lot of hate from some people because they're just ignorant of non-American fighters, is currently a 3-weight world champion, right? Beterbiev, Bivol, Usyk, Jesse Rodriguez, Devin Haney, David Benavidez, all on this list. None of those are 3-weight world champions like Junto Nakatani is, right? And he's the second youngest fighter on this list behind Jesse Bam Rodriguez. Everybody else is much older. David, not so much, but obviously, Haney as well, sorry. But Beterbiev, Bivol, Canelo, Crawford, Inui, Usyk, all 30 plus. I'm not sure how old David Benavidez is, but I think he's 28. Haney must be 26. Bam Rodriguez, I'm not sure, 24, 25. Junto is 25, 26. So these guys are just coming into their prime, right? So we know that obviously they have a lot more to contribute to the sport of boxing. And do I think fighters like Shakur and Tank, Kenshiro, Zurdo Ramirez should be a little upset that they're not on the list? Of course. They're competitive. The whole point of them being elite boxers is because of the competitive drive they have to be the best, right? And we know Shakur fucking thinks he's the best. I mean, he will tell you that. So you can really understand why he would be pissed off with this current situation. But it has more to do with the lack of really quality victories that he's had since he moved to 135 pounds. He hasn't beat any legitimate fighters at 135 pounds. His best wins were obviously at 130 pounds. Since he moved to this division, he hasn't really beat anybody. And that's probably why he was punished on this list, right? To be fair. David Benavidez, I mean, I don't know how he justifies on this list, except for his capping of Canelo Alvarez. For Tank Davis, I said he's already on my pound-for-pound list still. I didn't drop him off my list. But my question the other day was, how would somebody put him in the top 3? What has he done more significant than Usyk, Inui, Crawford, Bivol, Beterbiev, Canelo Alvarez? That's 6 fighters who've done fucking leaps and bounds more than him. Sure, Jesse Bam Rodriguez hasn't done leaps and bounds more than him. Junto hasn't. Devin Haney hasn't. David Benavidez definitely hasn't. Kenshiro has done more, but again, not leaps and bounds more than him. Even though if you look at longest reigning, most title defenses, Kenshiro is right up there, ahead of Benavidez, ahead of Haney, ahead of Junto, ahead of Beterbiev, ahead of Bivol, ahead of Rodriguez. Um, the only guys he may not be ahead of are Canelo, Crawford, and Inui. I think he's also ahead of Usyk. So literally 3 of the fighters on this list have done more as far as title defenses to Kenshiro. Only 3, right? But these people that are talking about unfair pound for pound lists, they don't mention Kenshiro. They don't know Kenshiro. They will say, who's Kenshiro fought? What's he done? Well, he's fought tons of world champions and he's made more title offenses than fucking everybody on this list except for fucking Inui, Crawford, and Canelo. That's pretty significant. He's also been a 3-belt unified champion at 108 pounds. The only reason he didn't become undisputed is because the Gonzalez guy blatantly ducked him after the fight was agreed, right? So he moved up in weight and obviously is fighting in his second professional fight at that division, winning winning a title, and now in his second fight in the division, I think it's his second. Now he's going to be unifying against another world champion right off the bat. So, we see the way some people move, the way some people carry themselves, and what some people actually do in their career compared to others. When people are critical of some fighters, some people want to chalk it up all to race because, in truth, that's what they're all about. That's what they do. They consistently ridicule and criticize fighters based on their race. So they just assume everybody is just like them and does the exact same thing, right? I know it's a sick, twisted mentality, but unfortunately, that's some of the people that represent the sport of boxing. And it's been that way for a long time. It ain't probably changing anytime soon. But let me know what you think about this current Ring Magazine list, because obviously things are going to change. Potentially Bivol is going to fight David Benavidez. If he beats Benavidez, he ain't going to be on that list anymore. If Benavidez wins, then he's going to be moving up that list and Bivol's going to be moving down. Canelo's going to fight Crawford. Whoever wins that list is obviously going to move up. Somebody else is going to be moving down. Devin Haney has fights coming up against Ramirez and then a potential rematch with Ryan Garcia. If he ends up winning those 2 fights, it's going to continue to move him up this list. If he gets beat or looks shell-shocked, he's going to probably fall right off that list, right? For Beterbiev and Bivol, obviously there's still talk about them doing a trilogy, depending on how that happens, obviously could affect these guys as well. And then for Junto, Jesse, Bam Rodriguez, and Inui, if they ever do actually step in the ring and fight each other, somebody's going to lose. So somebody's probably going to fall off the list. Somebody else is going to be elevated because of their level of competition, right? Level of competition, facing pound for pound quality fighters. And for Usyk, well, he's talked about retiring, so he's not going to be on this list much longer. He's going to fight Dubois. He could get beat against Dubois. And then he's going to have 1 fight probably afterwards. We don't know who against, but that's what he said. Probably 2 more fights to finish 2025 and then sayonara. And with the amount of money he's made, why not? If he can retire at this point of his career with 2 more legitimate victories in the heavyweight division, right, against this quality of opposition, finish your career at 25-0. People say, well, he only had 25 fights. But when you look at the level of competition he's faced from day one as a pro, you could throw another 20 fucking shit fights on it, like a lot of guys have, and push him up to 45-0. But you don't need those fights. When you start your career later, coming out of the amateurs, you jump right into the shit, right? And you fast track your career, and that's what Usyk has done, and he's done a great job. Unfortunately, the way it is, people are just going to consistently make it a race thing. They're going to consistently, make it about fucking representation. They're going to consistently give you pound for pound lists, but not really break it down and give you a criteria of how they make their list. So it's going to be critical of other people's lists, but they won't give you a criteria of how they make their lists, right? Whereas I do. And I think anyone can look at my criteria and totally understand who's on the list. Currently, right now, I think, Usyk is number 1. I still have Crawford at 2, Inouye at 3, but you could potentially have Bivol move past both of them, especially if he does beat Benavidez next. That would help solidify him even more, beating an undefeated fighter after the victories he's had recently as well. But then it depends on what everyone else does. That's the thing about pound for pounds, and I've preached this for years now. Nothing is static. Things continuously adjust based on the fighter's performances, the level of competition, the quality of opposition, the quality of the victory is going to elevate or lower people on the pound for pound list. It's up to them to do what they need to do to elevate them higher on a list. It's not up to you and me to try to justify them being on the list. Fine, you don't think Junto Nakatani's on the list. Sure, take him off the list. Put fucking Shakur on it. Take David Benavidez off. Put Tank Davis on it. I mean, the reality is Junto is still right in that top 15, along with Ken Shiro, Zerto Ramirez, fucking, of course, Shakur, Tank, and Lomachenko for, excuse me, some of the best fighters in boxing today. The only reason you would have an argument with this is if you really have a disdain for certain fighters based on whatever that may be, or you're just so fucking wrapped up with pound for pound lists representing you. And if it doesn't represent you, then there's got to be a problem. And we know really that's what a lot of this comes down to, representation. For me, there's no white Canadians on this list. Nobody represents me. I don't care, because when I talk about Usyk, Inouye, Crawford, Beterbiev, Bam, Inouye, Ken Shiro, Beterbiev, Junto, Tank Davis, Shakur, Devin Haney on the list, I'm talking about them being on the list based on what they've done in the ring. And some of them aren't even fighters I enjoy watching. Usyk, Bivol, Shakur, Haney, not my style of fighters. Inouye, Crawford, Beterbiev, Bam Rodriguez, Junto, right? I have way more prefer their style of fighting. More exciting, more power, more knockouts, right? But to each their own. The reality is their style doesn't dictate where they're on my list. It's based on what they've done. It's not based on the language they speak, the color of their hair or their skin, the country they come from, right? The fact that you have right now Crawford, Bam Rodriguez, uh, Devin Haney, and David Benavidez on this list, that's 4 Americans out of 10 spots. You have 2 Japanese fighters, 2 Russians, 1 Ukrainian, 1 Mexican, right? You could flip flop a few other people, put 3 Japanese fighters on there, put 2 Ukrainians, maybe take 1 Japanese fighter, put another American on, and have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Americans on the list. Would that make you more happy if there was 5 Americans on the list? For some people, it would, because that's how they dictate and judge everything. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. Obviously, you don't need to have the same fucking issues that a lot of these other people have. But let me know what your pound for pound list is in the comment section. And what do you think about this list? Who deserves to be on the list? Who doesn't? We know Drunk Irishman thinks Zerto should be on the list. We know John Boxing thinks that fucking Tank Davis and Shakur both deserve be on this list, along with fucking probably Boots Ennis and Abdullah Mason, and probably fucking Oshaki Foster as well, right? When it all comes to push and shove. But let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace out. Can't make everyone happy.